Hi, class. After our little debacle online today with technology failing us, I've decided to post this video as a way to introduce you a little bit to the first theme of the course, which is culture. We're going to be doing cultural analysis and cultural comparison in this first essay sequence, and what we need to begin with is some understanding of what it means when we say culture and what it means to be a part of a culture. So there is a PowerPoint available in the first module right at the very beginning, Culture Intro, and you should take a look at that. I'm kind of going to go through that a little bit here, maybe skip some stuff. Most of it's just images, but we'll begin with the definition on the first slide, which is a group of people who share learned beliefs, behaviors, and attitudes. Now, this particular definition is one of many different definitions, but they all share some things in common, and a couple of these items are very important. First is obviously group. Okay, you can't be a culture all by yourself because you need to share with other people the same set of beliefs, behaviors, and attitudes. If you don't share them with anyone, then you are effectively not part of a culture. Now, probably the most important word in this definition is the word learned, all right, because this distinguishes between things that you are acquiring and things that are not a matter of choice. For example, you might say that you're a member of Black culture, capital B, and that's fine, and there may or may not be such a thing. I'm sure certainly you would argue that there is such a thing as Black culture, but it may be too broad and diverse to really understand exactly what it means. We'll get into that momentarily. The point here is, if you are a part of Black culture, that means that you have a set of beliefs that are common to people within that group. Let's go to a different example. Deaf culture, okay? Deaf culture would be a cultural group that shares a certain set of beliefs about deafness and other things that they have in common. Okay? It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be deaf to be a part of deaf culture. There are plenty of people who espouse the beliefs of deaf culture. For example, people who study American Sign Language or who work with the hearing impaired. Certainly, you know, in terms of if you want to look at race as an aspect of culture, and I'll get into that in a minute too, all right, what this definition tells us is that what color your skin is doesn't necessarily define your belief system, okay? Obviously, it has something to do with it, but it's not a determining factor. The beliefs that you possess that make you part of a culture are beliefs that you have learned and acquired, whether by choice or not, whether by someone else's teaching or forcing or whatever it might be, but these are not inherent characteristics. So that said, things like the color of your skin, the color of your eyes, your nationality, these are not learned things. These are things you have no control over, really. Well, I don't know. People can get darker and lighter in their skin, I suppose, and we can put on contact lenses. And if you're a redhead, you can become a blonde. And so maybe you do have more control over those things than we would normally think. But I think you understand the point. Having red hair is not a belief. Okay? Being from the country of Puerto Rico does not make you culturally Puerto Rican. It's just the place you were born. Now, as I said, obviously these things go together. And why? Well, because wherever you are, you're surrounded by a group of people who have the ability to influence you. And so if you are surrounded by people of a certain color who share a certain mindset, whether you are that color or not, you have a tendency to adopt those beliefs, okay? The more like you are to someone, the more likely you are to share beliefs with them as well, all right? Anyhow, so this definition is useful because what it does is it lets us see the difference between what a lot of people identify themselves as and the separation that has to occur between what's on the outside and what's on the inside. Culture is always the product of your mind, okay? What you think, what you believe, what you trust, what you accept, what you don't accept, all right, more than it is any given outside marker. Now, the next slide explains what cultural markers are, and essentially what it says is that these are the outside observable characteristics that are either represented or put on by any given member of any given culture as a way to identify themselves, all right? So, for example, somebody in the Red Sox Nation might wear a baseball cap with a B on it, a red ball cap with a B on it, and say, I am a part of this group. Now that's really overt, okay? Obviously, your clothing can represent a certain aspect of your identity, and so it can become a cultural marker. There are all sorts of different cultural markers that we can put on, okay? Some of the slides cover some more interesting and even extreme variations of things like piercing, tattoos, fashion, all right, that all are possibly representative of a set of beliefs. A cultural marker reveals an attitude or a belief about something, okay? Now, here's where it gets problematic and sticky, okay? You may or may not be doing it intentionally. Someone else may or may not perceive the markers that you represent yourself with, intentionally or unintentionally, as meaning what you assume they mean. In other words, and it's no different than with language, I can put on a t-shirt that says X, and you might look at it and think it means Y. And so here we have the foundation of cultural misunderstanding, okay? That from the inside, I have a certain set of symbols that reflect the ideals that I possess, and I show them to you, and because you don't necessarily possess the same ideals, and at least because you don't sit in the same group as I do, you don't necessarily interpret those symbols in the same way that I intend them. Does that make sense? So, we do it with language as well as we do it with symbols, all right? That any given word in the dictionary, for example, has a different meaning to me than it does to you in some maybe very small, subtle, and dangerously unnoticeable way. Real simple example would be a word like snake, okay? I say the word snake, and some of you will hear it with a positive connotation. In other words, it produces a positive emotional or personal value for you. You like snakes. Others of you might hear it with a negative connotative value. Its meaning is badness for you. Whether you've had a bad experience, you've got some sort of irrational fear, or perhaps you tap into biblical or historical values for that particular creature that don't necessarily have anything to do with its meaning in the real world, but nonetheless interpretations that have been attached to it. So just like we do that with words, and like the word snake, okay, which some people think are good and some people think are bad, it really is a consequence of interpretation. Okay, there's no morality attached to the legless invertebrate creature. All right, it's just doing what snakes do, and if we think it's evil, that's just what we think. Okay, and so we do the same thing with people, and we do the same thing with cultural groups. And when we are in groups that are different than other groups, first of all, we tend not to be able to interpret accurately their meanings for themselves, and even more so, things we don't understand as a general principle of humanity scares us. And so we tend to think negatively of others. All right? This is a problem for us all. Anyway, the long story short is that we're going to be digging into cultural analysis and cultural interpretation. All right, looking specifically at the way that groups intersect and how that becomes problematic sometimes. I've talked to you a little bit about that, and we're going to dig in with your own experience and comparing that to each other's belief systems and experiences. So as you start to think about your own cultures and how you define yourself, what I'm going to encourage you to do, first of all, is to try to separate your beliefs from the things that you have no control over. What do you do might be a good place to start. Where do you work? What are your activities? Where do you hang out? Are all questions that might lead you to thinking of yourself as a member of a culture, more particularly a smaller, maybe micro or subculture, as opposed to some much more large and diverse culture. I mentioned black culture earlier, and I said that might be problematic. And it would be problematic in the same way that saying I am of American culture or something along those lines may work. In the different corners of the United States, there are incredibly diverse groups of people. The people in Florida don't sound at all like the people in the Northeast corner. The people in California don't think at all the same way the people in Florida think about the lives they're living and what's important. People in Seattle have nothing to do with the people in New England, all right, except maybe Starbucks, and that's not our fault. We like Dunkin's better anyway. Okay, so to say that you're part of an extremely large and diverse cultural group doesn't really help you from an analysis standpoint. So try to look at culture in a smaller scale. Okay, I, for example, could call myself a member of backpacking culture. Backpacking culture. I like to put stuff in my pack and carry it heavy loads up the sides of a mountain, get to the top, say how great it is, and then go back down. Well, there are a lot of beliefs that I share with other people who participate in this activity that bind us together. Some of which have to do with backpacking, most of which have to do with the outdoors, nature, and the value of nature, and some of which have nothing to do at all with the particular activity. But nonetheless, I share with this specific group. Okay, if I were to start saying outdoor culture instead of backpacking culture, all of a sudden the group becomes more diverse to the point at which we have a lot less in common. Okay, because somebody who is a hardcore backpacker who, lives his life in a tent or lives his summers in a tent is not necessarily the same type of outdoor person as someone who likes to take a walk in the park on Sundays, even though they might both claim to be part of outdoor culture based on the simple connection that they like being outdoors. All right, so the more narrowly focused your culture is, the more clearly defined it is. All right, and that's going to be useful to you. So think about yourself as a member of a smaller subculture as opposed to a larger one. Okay, for example, I don't know, a member of a particular church group as opposed to just calling yourself a Christian, if that's what you are. Okay, Christian, there are 100 different denominations, and even within those denominations, there are people who have different sets of attitudes and beliefs, not only about God, but about their own religious responsibilities. Okay, some play take it or leave it, others are hardcore or really strict about their belief systems, and they all go to the same church, and they all kind of look at that, as being the same, but it's not really true. So think about it that way. Now, you have a reading assignment to do called On Dumpster Diving, and then you have a journal writing assignment to do about that specific reading assignment. So you're going to have to do the reading first. Then you're going to see the On Dumpster Diving assignment, which has a series of questions, some related to the text, others related to your experience, your own life, and how it connects with the text. You're going to answer those questions and then move on to submitting that document in the discussion that's available immediately below where you find the assignment. The discussion is labeled submission as the last word of its title. All right, all you do is click on the discussion, open it up, click create thread. You will be able to paste your work in there. I've already forewarned you, and ComNet and WebEx gave you a great demonstration that I wasn't lying when I said don't trust technology. So as I said, create your documents outside of the internet, okay, in a Word document, and paste it into the interface where you're going to submit it, And then also please attach the file, and I'll explain to you later why I have a few reasons for attaching your files as well as pasting your document in there. Anyway, that's the assignment that's due for Thursday. If you have any questions or problems, or you're confused about what to do or how to do it, please send me an email. I'll answer it as quickly as I can. Have a great night.